today's top boxing news.
Here we are. Edward, first things first. Yesterday, Katie Taylor returns against Amanda Serrano. Not saying this disrespectfully, but what's the point in this whenever Katie's 2-0 up? Because I see yesterday Katie was kind of disrespected quite a bit on stage. They make her walk second. They referred to Amanda Serrano as being the GOAT, I believe, as well. 2-0 up. What's the point in the trilogy at this stage?
The point is two or threefold. Number one, it's a great fight. I mean, the two fights were two of the best female fights you've ever seen. Two of the greatest fights you've ever seen. Number two, she's making an absolute fortune. And she wants to be in the biggest fights available. Obviously, promotionally, it's a big fight with a platform, and why not? I mean, it's a great fight for a load of money.
Now, that rationale may seem reason enough for Eddie and Katie to go and do a trilogy. The question is, do the fans want to see it? What is the reception from the people on the ground? And as luck would have it, Katie Taylor versus Amanda Serrano 3 ticket sales have already surpassed the first fight's totals. The brass at Madison Square Garden came out of the epic first Katie Taylor versus Amanda Serrano championship clash with the hope that it would pave the way for even more historic fights. The first day of general ticket sales for their trilogy clash have already exceeded those expectations. Event handlers have confirmed that the live gate for the third act between two of the sport's absolute best has already eclipsed the final take from the 2022 Fight of the Year at MSG. The famed venue will play host to their highly anticipated, undisputed Junior Welterweight Championship on July 11th, atop an all-women's card to stream live on Netflix. And because it's on Netflix, that in and of itself makes it bigger than the first fight was. And so if the question is, do people want to see a third fight? Do they want to see a trilogy? The answer is yes. Our first day of ticket on sale for Taylor vs. Serrano 3, and we have just surpassed the total ticket revenue of the first iconic match between Amanda and Katie at MSG. Nikisa Badarian, co-founder of MVP, declared on Wednesday, "Amazing. Ireland's Taylor, 24-1 with 6 knockouts, will once again risk her fully unified Junior Welterweight Championship against Serrano, 47-3 with 1 draw and 31 knockouts, a Brooklyn-bred Boricua who fights on MSG grounds for the 5th time in her storied career." Their April 2022 meeting saw the then unbeaten Taylor defend her undisputed lightweight crown via split decision, their unforgettable clash. The first women's bout to ever headline at MSG came before an announced, sold-out and rabid crowd of 19,187 spectators, which generated a live gate of 1.4 million in final sales. Taylor vs. Serrano 3 will easily push past the 2 million mark in due time and will likely once again produce a full sellout. Pre-sale began on Tuesday at 12 p.m. Eastern, with tickets released to the general public exactly 24 hours later. The response was swift and pleasing to the hosting site. People still want to see the fight, and that's the bottom line. Though getting it over the line was not without some sacrifices.
You know, we had to give away some concessions. You know, Katie, I think they wanted to be like introduced second at the press conference and the weigh-in and all this rubbish. You know, also, people don't know the fight is at 136 pounds, really, and Katie's defending her 140-pound titles. So she gave away some concessions as well. I don't get the whole narrative of the whole world saw what happened. I mean, they were two very close fights that, in my opinion, Katie Taylor won both of them. But I'll be honest, the first fight, I fancied we'd get the decision. In the second fight, because we were the away fighter and, you know, where we were in America, it was quite pro-Serrano. I thought, I'm not sure we'll get this. We got it. I thought the scores was bang on, and she'll beat her again. And it'll be 3-0, and we'll walk off with a sackload of money and go, thank you very much.
Madison Square Garden has been home to the biggest boxing matches in history, including the fight of the century, Joe Frazier versus Muhammad Ali 1, and the 2022 bout between Katie Taylor and Amanda Serrano. Joel Fisher, Madison Square Garden Executive Vice President of Operations told Boxing Scene in a provided statement, "We are proud to welcome these extraordinary athletes back to the world's most famous arena for another historic moment with our first ever all-female professional boxing card." Taylor is currently 2-0 in their series, though many have argued that Serrano could just as easily have won both fights. On both occasions, Serrano was one fight removed from featherweight, where she remains the lineal Ring Magazine, WBA, and WBO champion. She came up just short in a first fight that could have gone either way. Their sensational rematch last November 15th generated record numbers, but also sparked greater outrage. Taylor won by scores of 95-94 on all three judges' scorecards to defend the same undisputed crown that will be at stake in July. However, a lot of viewers felt that Serrano was done a disservice by the judges that night at AT&T. I agree. I scored the first fight to Katie, and I scored the second fight for Amanda, and I thought Amanda had it in the bag. Right before the judges' scorecards were read, I thought that Amanda had done more than enough in tandem with the point deduction that Katie Taylor received. I thought Amanda won. But if you don't see me shouting bloody robbery from the rooftops, it's because Katie Taylor had to make some concessions. Remember, this was an MVP show, not a matchroom show. Katie wasn't the house fighter. Both fights were in the U.S., not in Ireland. Katie didn't have home field advantage. So you really can't say that there was partiality in play. Home cooking? Katie wasn't at home, and it's for that reason I won't call it a robbery, but I will say I thought Amanda won the second one. So here comes the third. And based on the preliminary metrics, there still is interest to see them do it one more time. Can Amanda win it? Can Amanda do an even better job in the third fight than what she did in the second? We'll find out in July. Men's junior middleweight news as it pertains to another Puerto Rican fighter. Per WBO President Gustavo Olivieri, Fundora and Zayas negotiations, be advised that Top Rank and the PBC have jointly requested an extension of the negotiation period. Committee grants extension until Friday, April 25th, no later than 4 p.m. And it was veteran boxing scribe Abraham Gonzalez who said it best. Okay, it seems like they are at least trying to make this happen. The key word in that tweet was jointly. It's a fight that fans would certainly be interested in. I happen to agree with Abraham. The request for an extension came from both the PBC and Top Rank, heralding that they just need a little bit more time. And it's not one way that anybody's taking a hardline stance. Teamwork makes the dream work. But if by some chance they can't come to an agreement by themselves, they can't reach a deal amicably, remember that this is a mandated fight. Remember that Xander is his mandatory challenger. And remember that non-compliance would result in the brown belt being forfeit. It would go to Xander. Worst case scenario, they don't reach a deal amicably by the deadline and it goes to a purse bid. What you have to ask yourself is, who wins the purse bid? Would the PBC be able to secure the rights to that fight? And if they did, would Top Rank send Xander over, or would they pull him out? Questions that need answers. And what if it happens the other way? What if Top Rank wins the bid? Will Samson Lukowicz send Sebastian over, or would he surrender the brown belt to keep him out of that fight? Questions that need answers. Now, I happen to think that Top Rank is a bit more invested in Xander than Samson is in Sebastian. And I know that Sebastian is the champion here, but he's not a big ticket seller. Sebastian by himself, main eventing shows, doesn't draw big crowds, whereas Xander, he's Puerto Rican. And we know the Puerto Rican fight fans are fiercely loyal. It's only a matter of time before Xander is headlining his own shows and doing decent gates. Big gates. So when I think about that and I look over at this, the only alternative to a Xander Zayas fight in terms of scale would have to be a Virgil Ortiz fight, the WBC interim champion. But that is yet another fight. So another situation just like this one, because Golden Boy feels about Virgil what Top Rank feels about Xander. Right back in the shit. If this fight does materialize, I like Xander Zayas to win a points decision. I think he has all the ingredients it takes to pry those belts away from Sebastian Fundora, though some don't agree. Some cite the lack of Zayas' stopping power.
That he doesn't knock people out.
Well, need I remind you, the guy who stopped Sebastian Fundora, Brian Mendoza, off a violent counter hook, he's not a big puncher either.
Not a big guy either.
And he still stopped Sebastian Fundora without as high a ceiling as a Xander Zayas. So when I think about Xander against that same Sebastian Fundora, I like Xander's chances.
There's a little bit of tribalism involved, too.
Some of the guys that are going with Sebastian Fundora to win the fight are only doing so because Sebastian is slightly more Mexican than Xander.
Well, Xander's not Mexican at all. He's Puerto Rican.
Exactly. To some, this is yet another installment of the Mexico versus Puerto Rico rivalry because Sebastian happens to be a quarter Mexican, I think it is.
It's something like that. And on that predication alone, it would seem that there are many going with him to win the fight. Nationalism, tribalism.
And some against Xander Zayas, the Puerto Rican fighter. There are people out there who don't like him on that premise, who are rooting against him just because he's Puerto Rican.
But that's their prerogative. I don't edge fights based on what flag the fighter flies.
Where the fighter is from. I'm more focused on how the fighter fights.
Because that's what determines who wins.
Not which one of them you've got more in common with, you sissies.
Gay.
The way I see it, Xander is a fundamentally sound fighter. Even if he's not the biggest puncher, fundamentally sound enough in tandem with his physical dimensions that there's not a big discrepancy in height between Sebastian and Xander like there is with so many other fighters at this weight. That if Brian Mendoza can get to you, so can Xander.
If Erickson Lubin can knock you down, so can Xander.
And I think Xander wins the fight if the fight happens, but I see so many people citing his lack of knockouts or his lack of power as if power is the only thing that determines who wins a boxing match. If that were the case, Artur would have stopped Dimitri in the rematch.
Fury would have stopped Usyk.
AJ would have stopped Usyk if it all came down to power, but it doesn't. There's more to boxing than who hits harder. Just in keeping with the theme of all things WBO, the WBO have received the Usyk versus Dubois 2 petition. Sky Sports Boxing has reported the WBO has received a petition to allow Usyk and Daniel Dubois to do a rematch for Undisputed.
WBO President Gustavo Olivieri said the WBO will reveal a decision after Joseph Parker's call as mandatory.
Now, being honest with you, I'm okay with either fight. I'm okay with a Joseph Parker fight. I'm okay with a Daniel Dubois fight. The Daniel Dubois fight likely pays better because it would be for Undisputed, because Daniel is buzzing right now, because of the makeshift controversy from their initial meeting and the feeling that there is unfinished business there.
The Daniel Dubois fight is bigger.
And that seems to be the direction that Team Usyk want to go in. They want to fight for Undisputed. His career is winding down.
He's in his late 30s. He's basically completed boxing.
Undisputed at cruiserweight as the away fighter every single time. Undisputed at heavyweight. What more is there left to do?
What else?
There's always an element of danger in the heavyweight division where you are always one punch away from being knocked out. So Daniel still is a threat to Alexander Usyk, even though Usyk knocked him out in their initial meeting, beat him into submission and forced him to take a knee. There still is an element of danger in a second fight, especially now that Daniel has gone on a tear.
He's riding high.
He beat Hrgovic, he beat Miller, he knocked out Anthony Joshua. Now he wants to knock out Alexander Usyk. If there is a second meeting, I expect Daniel to come out hard and fast.
Hard.
Oh, yeah.
But how would that be different from the first fight? How would that be any different from what Alexander Usyk saw from Daniel in the beginning?
It's for that reason that I think Usyk can beat him again. Because even though Daniel is doing very well for himself and he's riding high, as a fighter, he really hasn't changed.
There is not a dramatic difference between the Daniel Dubois we see here today and the Daniel Dubois of yesterday. He's just a lot more confident because he hung in there and racked up some decent wins, and credit to him. But tactically and technically, he appears to be the same fighter.
What would he do differently in a rematch? Perhaps go to the body more. Target the body from the very beginning.
But of course, targeting the body would leave his head open for counter punches, for counter shots. So it is a trade-off, like everything else. In spite of that, I wouldn't mind seeing a second fight, with the appeal being finishing the quote-unquote unfinished business.
And I like the Parker fight too, just because we haven't seen Usyk in there with Joseph. You know, we saw him 2 times with Anthony, 2 more with Fury. Now we might see him 2 times with Daniel, where Joseph would bring something else to the table, something new, something we haven't seen, because he, like Daniel, is also riding high.
Now, Usyk's last 2 fights were paid for by Turkey LL Sheik, and I wonder if he fights Daniel again, is that going to be on Turkey's dime or Frank? Because that matters too. Who is at the helm of the promotion?
Sure, Frank would love it if Daniel could get revenge on Alexander Usyk and see himself crowned undisputed champion. He'd love that.
To get Daniel home field advantage, to give him the best chance to see that happen. Usyk has never had the luxury of home field advantage like so many of these other fighters, but he is getting on. He is getting up there in age, and he's only human.
So where he never needed home field advantage to win before, at 37, 38 years old?
And that's a part of the intrigue. That's a part of what sells a second fight. That the heavyweight division really is a more spontaneous division than all the others. You're always in danger of being knocked out. You're always 1 punch away from being knocked out. And Daniel is in pursuit of revenge. He's the bigger, younger fighter who has time and perhaps the promotion on his side.
Do you think the WBO will stand aside and let these 2 boys fight?
Gustavo seems a reasonable man, so it's hard to say, because there's a reasonable argument for Joseph Parker to get his crack at the apple, but at the same time, we are talking about undisputed here. We are talking about one of the biggest, if not the biggest fight you can make in the heavyweight division right now.
The Dubois rematch is bigger than the Parker fight. The Parker fight is just a run-of-the-mill title defense. There's a lot more money tacked on to a Daniel Dubois rematch, and a lot more history.
Prestige, because it's for undisputed.
I don't really know what's going to happen, but like I said, I'd be okay with either fight. Whether it's a Parker fight or a Dubois fight, I am okay with either. We just have to wait and see what direction Usyk ends up going in.
So there are questions that need answers, but the saving grace is that the WBO is usually Johnny on the spot with this stuff, and they're nowhere near as situational as some of the other alphabet organizations. They're consistent.
Thus, the answers that we are waiting for, well, we won't have to wait too long.
And they are now deciding whether or not they want to grant Usyk this exemption to the mandatory, maybe his age, and that this is for undisputed. The occasion may be factors that they factor into their decision, that you might as well, because this guy's career is winding down anyway.
We'll see.